This episode is brought to you by SkinCeuticals, the #1 medical aesthetic skincare brand worldwide and the leader in antioxidant science. To learn more, visit www.skinceuticals.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patty Ferris. I'm a board-certified dermatologist, and I'm your host for this episode of Skincare Confidential. We are so excited today to have with us Dr. Giuseppe Valacchi. We're going to answer lots of burning questions that you might have as dermatologists and practitioners about the use of antioxidants. Let me read you Dr. Valacchi's bio, and I think you'll understand why I'm so excited about this particular interview. Giuseppe Valacchi is a PhD. He is the David H. Murdoch's Distinguished Professor of Regenerative Medicine at the University of North Carolina and a professor of physiology at the University of Ferrara in Italy. Additionally, he's an international scholar at Young-hee University in Seoul, South Korea. He has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD in cellular physiology. And he's heavily focused his research on inflammation, oxidative stress, the role of the exposome. We're going to talk about all of this today with a very special focus on skin and the gut-skin axis. He's also recently been involved in understanding the alterations in redox's involvement in the pathogenesis of Rett syndrome and autism spectrum disorders. And he's published over 350 peer-reviewed manuscripts, 20 book chapters, and 4 books. You're a busy guy, Giuseppe. You've got lots of awards, way too many things for me to read. But your contribution to the medical literature on oxidative stress and its role in photoaging and environmental aging is really unparalleled by any other researcher. So welcome to Skincare Confidential.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your introduction. That was nice.
So we're going to start maybe like a little on the simple side. Let's talk about, you've done so much research on the exposome. Let's talk about the exposome. I think when we think of the exposome as dermatologists, we immediately go to ultraviolet light, of course, but we now know there's longer wavelengths of light, and you've done so much great work on pollution. So talk a little bit about that whole package of the exposome.
Yeah, I like to start with a new word that is Anthropocene. So, is the new era. You know, we divide the history in the eras. And unfortunately, the eras that we study when we were in our historical book is changed. Now there is a new era that has been approved, has been well defined, that is Anthropocene. It means that we change the planet because pollution. So it means that we cannot go back. It's a new era. And Anthropocene means that the pollution is with us, it lives with us, it cannot live anymore. So we have to deal with that. And I like to say that because, especially now we are talking about skin, it's easy to understand that the skin is the main organ that is affected by what happened outside. And here comes the exposome. That the exposome is like the sum, all of what our body is exposed from where you are conceived to when you die. And that makes it very difficult to study the effect of pollution because we are all different and we are exposed in a different way. So maybe there is a time later I would like also to highlight a little bit the difficult methodology to study the effect of pollution on the skin. But just to go back to your question, we have been studying skin and pollution since, I think, the late 90s, when at that time I was in California. And in one of the best labs of oxidative stress at that time, and was Lester Pater. And when we start to study the skin and pollution, was almost a joke for many, because there was not too many papers and was not very serious issue. And I started with one that now is well defined as one of the most toxic environmental pollutants to which we are exposed any moment. Even now, I am exposed to ozone. There is no way you can avoid it. as we know, is made by photochemical smog, UV, and the car exhaust, but it's also made by our printer, and is always in our room. If you measure ozone in your room, you have some. And I remember we start to study the first time ozone effect on skin, and we found right after a paper that Jens still in the same lab published, we found that you have an increase of peroxidation and loss of vitamin E. Now, here brings a concept where the skin is a very fantastic organ. I mean, you know very well.
One of the best.
Yes, it's fun, but it's not all the same, as we know.
Right.
And what it happens to the skin is that we have a high concentration of antioxidant, of molecules, let's call it defensive molecules, in the epidermis rather than in the dermis. And that is actually the evolution that tells you that is a consequence of the epidermis being more exposed, and so it needs to be equipped with a very strong defense system. Think that, like, ubiquinol is 900% more concentrated in epidermis than in the dermis. The same for vitamin C, vitamin E, and catalase.
They're all up in the very top, right?
Yeah. So what we found that these are depleted. So if you deplete these, means that the skin is more susceptible. And we were able to show in the middle of the 2000 that when you hit the skin with a pollution, especially ozone, you have a cascade of effects that are not, they don't stay just in the epidermis, but actually they are able to go through all the epidermis, arrive to the dermis, and even lead to a possible systemic effect through these bioactive molecules. So you shouldn't think that the effect of pollution is just skin damage directly, but also indirectly. Why? Because when something gets through the bloodstream, it goes in the circulation and can get uptake again by the dermis and again hit the skin from the inside out. And that has been suggested, for example, for particulate matter.
So just to remind myself, because you and I have had discussions on this before, ozone doesn't actually penetrate the stratum corneum. It does cause a lot of damage for something that really is not penetrating. Now, particulate matter will penetrate, correct?
Okay, that is a big question, and that is really is a big debate, and in science is beautiful when you have debates because there are different theories. Particulate matter, it depends on the size. So big sizes cannot penetrate a perfect skin.
The tiny ones.
Very ultrafine particles below 1 micrometer, 0.1 micrometer, can penetrate, at least has been suggested that can penetrate either using the hair follicle to go through the hair follicle, or they may not be able to penetrate itself, but what is in the particle, that mainly are hydrocarbons, can be absorbed by the skin. So think of this.
They're kind of carriers.
Yes. So think of this as a very tricky mechanism. If you think a particle drops on your skin, what is attached gets absorbed by the skin. It damages the skin, and it's been shown that affect filaggrin expression and all the tight junction. So this get absorbed, induce inflammation. This inflammation is not only localized, but will affect that part of the skin. And now the skin is even more susceptible. So another particle that will drop on the skin now can get uptake even faster because the skin has this subclinical information that is more susceptible to penetration, even pathogen. This happens, it's like a chain. That's why it's very important to keep your skin clean. And another thing that I like to mention sometimes is not too many people mention that. We know that the skin is around 2 meters square. Okay, in our body, depends on your size, but it's actually bigger because our skin is not as flat as a sheet of paper, but has a lot of little wrinkle, a lot of little, it's not really, it has been shown that if you stretch the skin to the maximum, and so it becomes like a sheet of paper, the skin is actually 10 times bigger. So you have to think that inside of all these, little loops, particles, pollution can sit and continue affect the skin.
Kind
That's
of a
why
reservoir effect.
Yes.
Interesting. So talk about, I know you've done studies looking at the sort of synergistic effects of sun exposure and pollutants and, how all that works with the downstream damage that occurs to the skin.
Very good point. It really binds very well to what we were talking earlier. Ozone cannot penetrate. So UV light, we know, UVB mainly epidermis, UVA more epidermis, and we know how the mechanism is this. But why is it important to know their mechanism? Because biology teaches us that if two insults use the same pathway, this pathway will be saturated. And at that point, you cannot have additive effect. But if they use different pathways, you have additive effect because they affect the skin independently from their pathways. And that is the problem. As you said, ozone does not penetrate, but the damage is due by a cascade of molecules that can be oxidants or lipid or peroxidation products that affect the skin. UV instead can penetrate directly and can generate ROS already inside the skin. And this is easy to understand that will lead to an additive, if not synergistic effect of multi-pollutants effect. And we did a study in the past where we actually did a super pollutant, multi-pollutant study. We use diesel exhaust, we use UV light, and we use ozone. And we found that all three had additive effect to the skin. So that is the bad news. But the good news is that you can prevent this. You can prevent this with a daily and constant topical application of defensive molecule, antioxidant, as you want to call it. I say this because if 20 years ago or 30 years ago, maybe the topical application was important, but not mandatory, I think that today you should teach to your kids, to anybody, like you brush your teeth in the morning, you need to use protection for your skin. Because the environment, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are in the Anthropocene. We are exposed to so many pollutants and stressors that our skin cannot really take it with our help.
Yes. And I know you've studied a lot of the combination antioxidants and their protective effects against pollution and combination environmental assaults, let's call it.
And so what I say is that, in my opinion, is always better to use a mix of defensive molecules, of nutrients, of antioxidants, of polyphenols, because also in this case, they use different mechanisms and they can have a better defense effect on the skin. And as we know, one thing is to use a molecule that sacrifices itself directly, let's say vitamin E, to the oxidation. But then there are molecules that we know that derive from plants, many are polyphenols, that they do not really react directly with in a redox reaction. But what they can do, they can induce an endogenous cellular defense that we know all the NRF2 pathways, and that is a long-lasting effect. So from one side, it's good to have some molecules that protect you directly, sacrificing themselves, but from the other is also to have something that kind of increment and implement the antioxidant defense, endogenous antioxidant defense.
So you get boosting of your own endogenous, primarily the enzymatic antioxidants with the NRF2 pathway.
Perfect, like catalase, peroxidase, superoxide dismutase.
Right.
that are very important.
So
And
that
so
sort
that
of
is,
combination products make sense there. Let's talk about one of the sort of difficulties of combination antioxidants is their stability. And we've
yeah.
all kind of lived through the vitamin C era when it was very difficult to stabilize. And obviously, some of these combination antioxidants have greater stability than others. And I know you did some recent work looking at CE ferulic and sort of the role of ferulic acid in stabilizing vitamin
Yeah,
C and vitamin E, which are inherently not all that stable. So talk about that study. It's
yeah.
very interesting. And I
We
think
did a
it'll
very
also answer a
different
question a
study.
lot of derms have, which is how long do these topical antioxidants last in the bottle?
So I think everybody that buys Ciferulic, you know, a test that if you get it for Christmas and then you put on a drawer, and because you want to finish first what you are using of it, and then let's say 2 months, 1 month, 3 months after, you go get it, you open, and you see that the color is a little bit darker. It's not.
Right.
So the question is, these are those products still active? Do they still work or not? So we did this study where it was a fun study. I really, really liked it. We took Ciferulic, 6-month-old bottle, so freshly made, 6 months old bottle, 12, and even 36, 3 years that was in the drawer.
Wow.
And we added to skin. We did this in skin explants. We expose to UV light 100, 200, and 400 millijoule. So to have also range of millijoules with the skin. And we measure some markers related to oxidation and also to skin morphology and barrier. And we found that, very surprisingly, even 36 months Ciferulic unsealed, it was very effective. Maybe lost 5 to 10% effectiveness, but was really fantastic result. So let's say sealed, it was really efficient. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the data, but maybe next time I will show to you. We are doing now another study that is a consequence of this. What happens if you have it open? So what happens over time if you have a Ciferulic that has been open for 6 months and then you want to see if it's still effective? And that would change also the color. We don't have a result yet, but that is another data that we will bring maybe in a few months. So we are running experiments now. So the take-home message is that the color seems to not affect the efficiency and efficacy of the compound, and that was really surprisingly from one side.
Yeah, that's such an important finding because we get asked that question as practitioners all the time, and that's a very important finding that has great clinical application for us. What about topical antioxidants in combinations with sunscreens? I mean, I think you and I both are sort of on the same page. Like, I use my topical antioxidant and then I'll use a sunscreen or a moisturizer with a light sunscreen. I use that sort of as 2 layers, but there are a lot of products coming into the marketplace now that incorporate both.
So the difficulty here is to have a stabilized antioxidant in the sunscreen. So say is very easy, but under the formulation point of view is very difficult because as we know, they act differently. The sunscreen will absorb the UV light. The antioxidant should either quench ROS, oxidation, or stimulate the endogenous response. So I still think that until that some data are really really clear, to have 2 layers of compounds, and means to have a sunscreen, nice mineral sunscreen, and a good antioxidant mix. I think is the best approach at the moment.
This episode is brought to you by SkinCeuticals, the #1 medical aesthetic skincare brand worldwide and the leader in antioxidant science. To learn more, visit www.skinceuticals.com.
Let's talk a little bit about metals. And I know that there are metals that come in with pollutants and how metal ions can upregulate ROS, and how does that whole thing play in? And then this kind of gets us into the discussion of chelation, which I know is something you and I are both interested in.
Yeah, I think that the iron part is one of the most important and with open debate in the skin. We know that UV can actually release iron from the storage, and we know that free iron is kind of dangerous for the cells because it can lead to the so-called phantom reaction when it reacts with hydrogen peroxide. And remember, hydrogen peroxide is formed inside the cells continuously. We have an enzyme like NADPH oxidase that makes hydrogen peroxide, because hydrogen peroxide is very important as a signaling. This leads to a formation of a compound that is called hydroxyl radical, that is the most noxious ROS ever formed in our cells. It just destroyed your lipids, leading to lipid peroxidation. So being able to quench, to chelate this effect is very important, especially when you are really exposed to UV, because you know that you will release a lot of iron. So this is for sure a very good approach, and we have shown in the past, actually we did even still with ciferulic, that a chelant and ciferulic were really able to prevent totally the damage of UV on the skin. I published this, I think, 3 years ago. So showing that be able to chelate iron is one of the most important things. Also, why, as you mentioned, particulate matter itself is not a damage. It is not that dangerous to us. What makes a particulate matter noxious is what is attached to a particulate matter. And always you have iron, you have metals. And these metals, when they get incorporated in the skin, then they can lead to this phantom reaction and oxidative damage. So again, chelation is very important to work on that. But on the other hand, as a biologist, you need to be careful to not over-chelate your iron, because as we know, is very important. The iron metabolism is very important for the skin homeostasis. So it should be, we are in the era of precision. There is precision nutrition, there is precision medicine, and also I think it wouldn't be bad to have a precision skincare, in the sense that based on what you are exposed, or let's say you travel to China, you will be exposed to a lot of particulate matter. You should take an extra care of products that can prevent the pollution damage, and that can be done if you are going in the mountain, and you will be exposed to a lot of UV. So maybe an extra chelant could be useful, as you will have more free iron release in your cells and tissues.
So interesting. It's such a intertwined pathway, isn't it? You coined the term ox-inflammation, which I did not know until I read your bio, but we've published and talked about ox-inflammation. So explain that, because I think it's such an important concept.
Yes, so this is a chicken-egg puzzle, in the sense when you have oxidative stress phenomenon, it always binds to correlate to inflammation. So what we think, that's why, so it's very hard to say you have an inflammatory response, but you don't have an oxidative response, because you have both together. So it happens that sometimes you have an oxidative response, but you don't see a clear inflammation. But it's there, and then we call subclinical inflammation. So in this case, what happens is a positive feedback that the oxidative compounds lead to more inflammatory response through, as we know, redox-sensitive transcription factors such as NFKB, and this will increase even more the oxidative stress, because we know the inflammation can recruit inflammatory cells, and then you have a burst of, for example, neutrophils, that they release a lot of oxidants, and this will increase the oxidative stress, and this will even more will activate an FKB, and that you have this positive feedback. And remember, in biology, we have very few positive feedback in nature, and this is one of them. Usually are negative feedback.
Right.
Because what you try in your body is always to have a high response and then to quench it. But in this case, we have actually it's a positive feedback, a natural positive feedback. That is one of the few that we have in physiology.
Super interesting. Talk a little bit about your work that you've done on nutritional antioxidants and the sort of gut-skin connection.
Yeah. Oh, that is I think one of the most fascinating aspects now in physiology. So, as a physiologist, you study all the connection among all the organs, as you know. So, it's beautiful now that has been well cleared the connection gut-skin. Okay, we didn't need really this. We knew already, because we know that if one night you drink a little bit more or you eat a little bit heavier, when you wake up in the morning, you don't look great. Your skin doesn't look.
Simple experiment conducted thousands of times.
But it's true. And that is because the connection gut-skin. How is this connection made? It's mainly made by, as now we know, the microbiome. But not the microbiome as a population, as a mediators of the microbiome. Microbiome release a lot of metabolites. Many of them are really neurotransmitters, and they can stimulate skin. Has been shown, for example, there was a study some time ago that if you give carotenoids topically and carotenoids through the diet, they show that the one through the diet were much more protected to the skin from UV than the one topical. And that makes sense because you have a more systemic effect. So what I want to say is that don't think that if your diet is awful, if you add a good product on your skin topically, you will have a good skin. You need to cure the skin also with your diet. So you have to have a good diet, and you have to apply topically. This is important because they have an additive effect. What you add topically will lead to a cascade of metabolite and activation pathways that is different if you eat products. A classic example is resveratrol. If you eat it, it disappears very fast. You need tons of resveratrol. You should be drunk every day to have enough resveratrol in your bloodstream to prevent you. But topical is very effective, although it's very difficult to penetrate. So I think that nutrition and topical application are very good approaches that can prevent skin damage from the Anthropocene exposome era.
So you like the inside out combined with the outside in approach, which makes total sense. Maybe just as a wrap up, because we are almost out of time, I'm interested in what you think about the future of regenerative medicine as it relates to dermatology. You know, this is such an emerging field right now, Giuseppe. It's so top of mind with practitioners, and we're seeing more things in the literature. And now we've got exosomes and all kinds of technologies coming at us. Are we getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, or are we? Is this ready for prime time?
I think, and please just don't judge me for what I say. I feel it's more a gold hunting period where everybody comes up with a new idea, new technology, new proposal, and they are all good. But unfortunately, I don't see a very solid standardization of the protocols. So what I think is that we are very close to have something that will be then the gold standard for regenerative medicine. but I still don't see that yet, at least for the paper and the conference that I attend.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we're getting there. We're just about that close. But it's such an exciting field, and you've been right in the middle of it for a very long time. So I want to thank you for joining me today. It's so much fun always to talk to you, Giuseppe. I learned so much.
Thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough for being here, and keep up the good work. And we look forward to hearing the results of the studies that you've got going. And
happy to share as soon as I have them.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Ciao.